Well, to discuss this further, I'm now joined by former NHS nurse and lawyer Rebecca Butler. Rebecca, hello.
Hello, Bill.
Now, what about reducing EU cooperation? That's only going to make things worse, isn't it?
Well, I'm not sure the ECDC is actually anything to worry about, because we're taking our advice from the WHO, which is a United Nations organisation. So the ECDC isn't a supranational body, and it, as I say, it's just a case of repetition. I'd rather place all of my confidence in Public Health England and our own national bodies to advise us on how best to deal with the pandemic. We are all using WHO information.
But we really need to cooperate with our direct neighbours. We know, of course, we're separating because of Brexit, but coronavirus is bigger than Brexit, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. But what cooperation are you looking for? We have a Schengen border with all of Europe. Nobody's talking about shutting any of the national borders. But if any country chose to do so under EU law, they're perfectly entitled to. And they just tell the Commission that they're exercising their sovereign rights to shut their borders. I don't see the ECDC adds anything to the argument and doesn't add to the body of information on the coronavirus epidemic, or pandemic as it will be very shortly.
And you are a former NHS nurse. We're having more infections confirmed. You're even predicting a pandemic now. What's the government doing? It needs to take more urgent action, doesn't it?
Well, the issue is that the death rate still seems quite low. It's about 3% maximum. But the problem with coronavirus is it is actually hospitalising people. And once you're hospitalised, if they haven't got their hands on your pneumonia within about a week or so, then you could potentially be critical. Now, the issue is we have 4,000 ITU beds in the UK. They operate at about 85% bed occupancy. So what we would have to do, if we can't snuff out the exponential rise in cases, is that we'd be looking at cancelling surgical procedures in order to free up those ITU beds and have a bed occupancy down to 80-odd%. Then the more critical cases end up on something called ECMO, and that only has a capacity of 28 to 35 in the country. So if you're looking at patients going into ITU and having ECMO, the risk of death is very, very high. So what the government actually has been discussing today is looking at, first of all, containment. So that is legislation being passed to enable the government to put areas into lockdown. And then if they get past that, and I think pretty much every expert expects this to peak more than it has done, then they look at flattening off the epidemic graph so that you have better capacity over a longer period of time to deal with the more critical cases. So the NHS is perfectly capable of dealing with this as long as they can flatten the curve.
Right, so from your medical experience and expertise, though, this is, of course, all going to be in place if the crisis does indeed escalate. But we need to stop the spread of the virus in the first place. Are we getting enough information and help from the government? There's Jacob Rees-Mogg telling people to use tissues. I mean, this isn't a cold or even regular flu. Isn't he just being a little bit patronising?
Well, actually, coronavirus is a regular cold in normal speak. So, yes, normal hand washing, hand sanitizer techniques are absolutely the right thing to do. I mean, I was quite critical last week that the government allowed the climate strike for schools to be held in Bristol, because it comes on the back of a half-term holiday where they would have had no idea where a lot of those kids spent their week away. And I was quite surprised at the absence of public health guidance for that school strike, because anybody who's had kids knows that they're super spreaders of just about everything. Right. I'm really still very concerned about that, because contact tracing is irrelevant when you have a group of 15,000 people from everywhere turning up. So it's things like that that I think the joined-up thinking has to be a little bit quicker in government.
All right, just a final thought, though. Is there more to this than we know about? You say, yes, it is perhaps very similar to flu, but it's not really like a regular cold or anything like that, is it? Because we are seeing people now dying.
Yeah, but people die from seasonal flu every year. What makes this unique is that it has a very long incubation period. So people are going to be spreading the disease before they get symptoms. Some of the research has showed that it's even up to 24 days incubation. The median is 14. So that's where the term super spreader comes. And that is the big problem with this disease. It's nowhere near as fatal as SARS or MERS, but it puts more people in hospital. That is going to be the challenge for the NHS, which is why that epidemic curve has got to be flattened. And you flatten the epidemic curve by people taking responsibility for their own actions, no social kissing, wash your hands regularly, sneeze into the crook of your arm and all of that. Flatten that curve out to reduce the transmission rate. That's really important. And that's where the NHS will suffer, is if they don't flatten that curve.
Rebecca, thank you very much indeed for joining us live here on RTK. Rebecca Butler.
Thank you.